And so finally, we arrive at the final word in the list. While some traditions divide this word into two, I think that this really covers kind of everything under this idea of do not desire or do not covet. Here's what it says. And you will not desire the wife of your neighbor. You will not crave the house of your neighbor, his field or his servant, or his maidservant, or his ox or his donkey, or anything which is to your neighbor. Word number 10, no coveting. This word actually moves beyond action. It pushes it actually now to intent. It's not just stealing. It's not just taking unlawfully. It's actually my intent. Don't even let it be a desire you harbor. Notice this is not enforceable, right? In this way, it's a lot like the first of the words, no gods before Yahweh. How do you tell if someone has another God before Yahweh? Well, you only tell when they begin to act out on that, when they begin to worship other gods. And so this, I think, lets us know this list is really not intended to be some sort of government or legislation for the people. It's instead a foundational covenant commitment to Yahweh. It gets at the heart of the behavior of the people. It helps us realize there's not some sort of rule-following instruction here as much as these are the principles we need to listen to in order to live a good life. So what is this word? What does word number 10 actually guard against? Well, the first word used for what you are not supposed to do with your neighbor's wife is desire. It's actually not necessarily a bad word when it's used in Scripture. Sometimes it just means desired thing or even treasure. But sometimes people want something so bad that it actually becomes a problem. It can manifest itself in a deep longing, a hunger. And in this verse, the object is something that does not belong to you. You have not made a covenant commitment with the wife of your neighbor. So she is not yours. Stay away. And so if I put this into practice, my neighbor knows that I'm never going to be trying to mess with his marriage. He can live safely and securely. Now, as the word goes on, the second prohibition uses a different word. It actually says, don't crave. And this word is used mostly negatively throughout Scripture. Don't crave the house of your neighbor or his field. And the list goes on and actually lists 7 different things that you're not supposed to crave. And it ends with, in anything that belongs to your neighbor, just in case you felt like you got off because something was left out of the list. So don't go craving his ox. Don't go craving his beautiful vineyard. Don't go craving his brand new threshing sledge, right? And the word suggests a repetition of behavior. So don't desire and keep on desiring. A longing like that is just going to eat you up inside. And so with this, I am prohibited from dwelling on areas of my life where my neighbor actually might be better off than me. I have to be content with what I have. So this text is actually moving us to think about the desires we have, about the things that are not ours. So then, how does this connect with the book of Deuteronomy? Interestingly, I think this seems to go with Deuteronomy 26, 1 through 15. In this text, the people has already been told, they've already been told that everything that they produce in the land, all of their first fruits, God calls it, all of that belongs to God. And so they are supposed to go down to the place that God is going to choose, and there they're supposed to offer up their first fruits. Now, there may be a temptation to keep back some of those first fruits for themselves, that people might want to limit God's portion. And so what they do is they come down and they actually have to declare something before Yahweh. In fact, verses 5 through 10 make up what we might call liturgy. Liturgy number 1. This liturgy that they're supposed to pronounce or declare before Yahweh says this. Deuteronomy chapter 6, starting in verse 5. They're supposed to say, "A wandering Aramean was my father, Now, the word there for wandering could be translated as starving Aramean. I think it's possible it could go either way. And probably we're thinking back to someone like Abraham or Jacob, either referring to their landlessness, a wandering Aramean, or their hunger, and a starving Aramean. And that's actually what ended up driving them down to Egypt in the first place, where they became great. But regardless, you say, a wandering Aramean was my father. But then this is how it goes on. And he went down into Egypt and sojourned there, few in number, and there he became a nation, great, mighty, and populous. And the Egyptians treated us harshly and humiliated us and laid on us hard labor. Then we cried to the Lord, the God of our fathers, and the Lord heard our voice and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. And the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with great deeds of terror, with signs and wonders. And he brought us into this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And behold, now I bring the first of the fruit of the ground, which you, O Lord, have given me. And you shall set it down before the Lord your God and worship before the Lord your God. Notice what's happening here. The people have to come down, and when they present their gift to God, they celebrate in his presence by actually pronouncing this sort of liturgy that they read out in his presence. They recite their history as they give their portion. They recall God's good grace in giving them all of this abundance. The best way to guard against feelings of scarcity is to remind yourself of your abundance. And I think this moves the people to reflect on God's goodness and not so much on their lack. But then notice what happens in the following verses. It says, verse 12, when you have finished paying all the tithe of your produce in the third year, which is the year of tithing, giving it to the Levite, the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widows, so that you may eat within your towns and be filled, then, verse 13, you shall say before the Lord your God. In other words, verses 13 through 15 go on to give another pronouncement. Here, we might call it liturgy number 2. As the people come down, they are supposed to say this before the Lord their God. I have removed the sacred portion out of my house. Moreover, I have given it to the Levite, the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow, according to all your commandment that you have commanded me. I have not transgressed any of your commandments, nor have I forgotten them. I have not eaten of the tithe while I was mourning, or removed any of it while I was unclean, or offered any of it to the dead. I have obeyed the voice of the Lord my God. I have done according to all that you have commanded me. Look down from your holy habitation, from heaven, and bless your people Israel, and the ground that you have given us, as you swore to our fathers, a land flowing with milk and honey. And so, can you hear what happens in this process? The people are to swear that the portion that they are giving belongs to God. The people promise, I haven't violated any of it. All of it belongs to you. I have listened to your voice. I have obeyed what you said. And in light of this obedience, then they ask God for his blessing. Many have noted that this desire to covet that we talk about in word number 10, it's actually connected to the 8th word, do not steal. But the parallels in Deuteronomy for do not steal all refer to moments of potential ambiguity, when it isn't precisely clear who gets what or what belongs to who. Not so with this one. You see, the emphasis in this section is on not desiring something that actually belongs to Yahweh in the first place. He claimed it at the very beginning. And so, since it lies in your possession, there's a sense in which it's sort of like you're borrowing the produce from God until that point that you give it back to him. And if it is in your hands, I think it could be kind of easy to start to think about, wow, I wonder what I could do with this extra that I have here. Maybe as you hold that produce for Yahweh before you actually give it up to him, you begin to process this. You begin to think that you don't have enough. Maybe you think that it would be safer to just hedge your bets, maybe keep back some for yourself. And so this lie of not enough begins to whisper louder and louder in your ear. Maybe there isn't going to be enough to go around. I do have a lot of families to feed in my community. I have a lot of mouths to feed in my own family. What happens if we have a bad crop year next year? What would it be like if I could just secure for myself a little bit more? And God says, don't begin to think that you should get or acquire these things for yourself. In fact, it is God's act of generosity that should curb your coveting desires. By the act of giving to God, giving freely to God, scarcity begins to loosen its hold on your heart. Daniel Block notes about this final word. He says, the goal here is to create a climate of trust and security within the covenant community. By concluding the Decalogue, the 10 words on this note, Yahweh recognizes that actions arise from within, and that neither proper behavior by the individual nor the security of the community can be legislated. These are achieved only as all the members purpose within their hearts to place the interests of others ahead of themselves. So then, what would it look like for us to begin to live out this 10th word in our lives today, to shema this word? Well, since both of the words here, desire and crave, have to do with what happens in our hearts and minds, maybe it would help for us to just start paying attention to our hearts and minds. Maybe we need to stop and notice those moments when we are frustrated by our lack. In those moments, perhaps the solution is not just to beat ourselves up for our ingratitude, but rather to turn to God and to open our hands to Him. We remember that God is the one who takes care of us, and it leads us then to trust Him now more, even more and more, with whatever we do have and what we don't have. I wonder, though, if there's a sense in which we could also, whenever we start to feel that jealousy rise up within us, if we feel like we're starting to covet something that someone else has, if we might take just a few minutes to set aside something in our lives. Maybe we should set aside some of our possessions. Maybe we should set aside some of our money. Maybe we should set aside some of our time and choose a way in which we might be able to give that thing to God. Maybe in the process, we even revisit some of these liturgies in Deuteronomy chapter 26 and recite them ourselves. And in so doing, maybe we will find that our level of satisfaction in God's enough begins to grow, and we begin to realize that really He does provide more than we could ever need.